This week on Life After 50, you're going to meet Patrick. He is an immigrant from Ghana. He has the most impressive immigration story I've ever heard, and I've been listening to these sort of things for 20 years. Sit back and get ready. This is a long interview and one of the best I've ever done. Here is Patrick Asare. All right, Patrick. So I have interviewed a lot of people in my day, and I got to tell you, you have taken the cake in terms of, I said, what? What is it like being one of 18 siblings? And your mom was busy.
Yeah, a little correction there, 14.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
14.
18 has come up actually in some places. I don't know how that number.
But somebody said 18, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
14,
yeah.
18, at that point, it's an anomaly.
Yeah.
Nobody ever hears that. Where were you in 14?
Number 12.
Number 12.
Yes.
Which I think even makes it maybe a little harder because like Ryan, my son, is number 3 and he didn't get as many baby pictures as number 1. So, I mean, number 12.
Yeah.
How many boys, how many girls?
5 boys, 7 girls.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they still all alive?
2 of my siblings passed away. One passed away about 6 years ago, and the other one passed away about 4 years. Yeah.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
The second part of the incredible part of the 14 is that you grew up in Ghana.
Yes.
You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, Americans get so caught up in who's winning Dancing with the Stars and who's going to be the MVP of the Super Bowl that we really don't recognize what other countries have to go through. We just know we think we're great and that's it.
Yeah.
Describe in the most detailed way you can what Ghana is like, especially for a boy who's number 12 in a list of kids when you're young.
Yeah. So Ghana, the Ghana that I grew up in the 60s.
How old? How old are you?
About 63.
You're 63.
I'm 63
You don't
now.
look 63, bro. You look better than 63.
Oh, thank you.
Let me tell you that.
Yeah. So growing up in Ghana in the early 60s, I mean, it was a very different country from what it is today.
Okay.
It was a very poor country, and really nothing there. The village I grew up in. So Ghana, the capital of Ghana is Accra, and then it has a couple of big cities and some big towns. But most people grew up in small towns like I did, and mine was really a village.
A village.
A village, really. A village of about 200 people, and there was nothing there. I mean,
Nothing.
So there was a small elementary school where the government mandated that kids born should go and get some reading, arithmetic, and that was about it. Every adult in that town was a subsistence farmer, and illiteracy was probably 100%. And so
Couldn't read, couldn't write.
no. So both of my parents were illiterate, and they had 14 children, making a mistake of having 14 children, and so hunger was the defining sort of feature of my childhood. I mean, feeding 14 children in a household with no jobs, no nothing. And my father had a small plot of land that he farmed, and it was pretty barren soil, and so it didn't yield, I mean, that much in terms of crops. And so, it was a constant struggle for subsistence, really. And so education was really the last thing on anyone's mind in that environment.
Right.
And so as a child, I worked on farms a lot. Chores at home. There was no running water, no electricity.
So wait, so inside, I want to picture this because again, we are, in many ways, Americans become arrogant, thinking that everybody must live sort of like we do.
Yeah.
And when you say like a village or a town or it's poverty, you know, people are going to think South Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore. Baltimore probably looks like the Taj Mahal compared to what you're talking about. Yeah. So when you say you lived in a home I mean, were there any furnishings? What was the floor? Was it wood? I mean, gravel?
It was just dirt.
You lived on a dirt floor.
Yeah, dirt floor, and there's nothing like a bed that you sleep on at
What
night.
did you sleep on?
Like you got a piece of old rug, cloth, and most people slept on straw mats. I mean, they use straw to construct mats that you put on the floor, and it was rare material. I mean, you couldn't find enough of that. So you imagine a house with 16 people in it, 14 children, and my two parents.
Yeah.
So you're not going to find enough straw to build to make. And so we just slept on bare floors. And
were you all in one big room? Were there any dividers or partitions?
Yeah, there were 3 rooms in the house that I grew up in, and so my parents had one, and then the 2 basically accommodated everyone else, and so you just took a spot and got some hours of sleep. That was it.
You're going to have to forgive me to make this comparison, but I only know what I know.
Yes.
At some point in our life, we drew upon hard times, and we had to make a decision. I mean, American problem. I had 2 homes at the time. I had a big one and I had a little one. Yes. So I went with I'll sell the big one and move into the little one. And we had 4 children, a dog, my wife, and I living in 3 bedrooms. So it was 2, 2, and 2. And we thought we had it terrible. I mean, we went, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't even start to imagine having your day start on a dirt floor, going out as a young boy, 7, 8 years old, having to work on a farm, and then come home and then have to rest on that floor again. I mean, does your body after a while just start to adapt to that situation, or does it never get normal?
Well, there was really nothing like adaptation. But I mean, that's what you were born into, and so for you, that was life. I mean, so it wasn't like you knew something different that you then had to adapt to something that was terrible. So
we're going to go back to the childhood for a thing, but this has got to be one of the most interesting questions I've ever asked. What was it like for you, and what age were you the first time you actually slept in a real bed?
The first day I slept on a bed was when I went to boarding school. When I left home to go to boarding school, I was 15 years old.
And what did it feel like when you laid down on a mattress?
That was a full mattress in a boarding house where there was electricity, there was running water, and so it felt like you had gone into a different world. Really, I mean, it was.
Couldn't even explain it, right?
Yeah,
I go back to the Lynch family being in our home. People used to ask me all the time, how did you do that?
Yes.
Like as if we had a real suffering situation. But how did you do that? And I said, you know what? It was easy. In fact, our family is so tight-knit.
Yes.
I say this all the time, that to a certain extent, I think we may even nauseate people because we work together, we live together, we vacation together. Yes. We're always together.
Yes.
And I said to them, and each and every time they've asked me, it's because we lived in that little house. We had no other choice than to get along and to help each other, because we realized we were in such tight quarters, if we didn't, we'd make it miserable. And that's why, I mean, my 2 boys today, they live with each other. You know, they're best friends. Yeah. Did you have that same sort of experience where with your 12, I shouldn't say 12, 13 siblings, you were tight as a drum?
That is so fascinating that I loved hearing how you described your family life, because I credit every success I have had in my life, I mean, to how my father kept the family together.
Yeah.
This is a large family, illiterate guy who was struggling himself. I mean, he woke up at 3 a.m. Every day and did really hard work.
Yeah.
In the jungles, and came home probably 7 at night, and But he ran a very tight ship, and so you look at 14 children in a house. I mean, we were very, very close, and so that relationship really made a big difference. And so what you just described was
You could
music.
appreciate it,
Was
yeah.
music to
But
my
I mean,
ears.
I
Yeah.
and feeling for your father and your mother, um, that's an important component when you know that your family's together and they appreciate what you're doing in order to be able to stay a unit, and in your case, stay alive.
Yes.
If you don't mind me asking, just because I want people to paint a visualization in their head, you wake up in the morning, 8 years old, before you go off to that little school. Name some of the things that you actually had to do, tasks.
Yeah. So I said that we had no running water at home.
Yeah.
And so the most unpleasant chore as a child was carrying a large aluminum bucket on my head. And
Large aluminum
walking.
bucket, what, this big? This
Yeah,
big? Okay.
yeah, about that big.
Yeah. Which is big for an 8-year-old, by the way.
Yeah. So carrying that and walking about a mile to a river.
Okay.
And this was treacherous terrain. I mean, muddy, and part of it was through dense farmland, and so when it rained, I mean, this was really tricky stuff. I mean, to walk, terrain to walk, and so you walk through that, carrying this heavy load of water in your head. And
How far away did you have to walk?
About a mile.
So you had to walk a mile there with an empty bucket, but then
Yes.
a mile back with a full. And I got to imagine you're cognizant of the fact that every time you spill a little water, you create a bigger problem for you and your family.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. And you're not doing it once. I did that. My siblings and I did that trip 4 times each morning.
4 times?
Yeah, 4 times each morning.
So you walked 4 miles, so you had an 8-mile, right? I got that too? 8 miles every single day.
Yeah, you do about.
I mean, you're still in great shape. Is it embedded in your DNA at this point that walking is something that's just a natural thing that you do every day?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
I mean, because
exactly.
it's embedded in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now to bring you into the next part of that, I mean, you got your water coming back 4 times a day. I mean, you have to do that. How many nights, how many days were there when, like maybe in a span in a row, where you didn't have anything to eat?
Pretty much 3 meals was quite rare. For me personally, actually, because I at some point in my life, in my childhood, I actually decided that I was going to skip breakfast. I mean, there were too many kids in the house, and so my mother obviously couldn't cook in the morning for 14 children.
Yeah.
And so we were given, a couple of pennies each, I mean, to go out and buy, some breakfast. I mean.
Now, when you say go buy breakfast, the typical Americans would be like, well, where'd you get it? McDonald's, or would you get it where'd you get it from? When you're talking about buying a breakfast, are you talking about buying like a pineapple or a banana or an apple or something of that nature?
It was cooked rice, something like cooked rice or boiled plantain or something. There's a dumpling, a corn dumpling that we had. So a bunch of different foods that street side vendors sold in the village square. So you just walk there and handed over a couple of pennies, and they give you a scoop of rice, and that was your breakfast.
A scoop of rice.
Yeah.
On a total side note, we can come back to this maybe later if there's interesting aspects to it in your life now as an adult, but I've had doctors on my program, some of the biggest doctors in the world, and they say, heart disease is prevalent here in the United States because we don't eat right, we eat poisonous foods, and we overindulge in everything. If you look at areas of Africa, you'll find that very few people die of heart disease. And I guess that could be contributed to all the walking.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the eating what some would consider God's food, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So getting back to, so were there ever days consistently Not like a one-off, a two-offs, where you didn't have anything in your belly for a day or two?
Not a full day.
Okay.
So typically, I skipped breakfast most days, and then and so you came back home and you got some lunch, and we actually had to come home from school and cook the lunch ourselves. And so
Really?
yeah,
Really?
yeah, and so I was it was like a pressure cooker type of living, and so you did that, and then came back home late in the day, about mid-afternoon, and then you helped cook the family dinner, and that was never enough for all the people, and so my mother frequently went with very little or nothing, so that's a sacrifice that.
Oh, goodness, yes.
I remember her for.
I was going to say, as you tell that story, can you actually see it in your head?
Oh, yes.
You can, right?
Yes,
So it's burned in there.
Yeah.
The next question here I'm going to ask you, and I mean no insult to it at any means, but again, I want to bring it back to Americanism because, I mean, you're here in America, and this isn't going to come as a shock to you. Somebody who would be curt may say, well, you know what? Why did your parents have 12 kids or 14 kids when they knew they couldn't, A, afford it, and B, feed them?
Yeah.
You know, so what's the answer to that? What's the answer that the American who doesn't understand needs to know?
Yeah, these were. First of all, it was a different world.
Yeah.
And even today, if you go to the village, the kind of village, I mean, they still exist.
Yeah.
If you go to that kind of place, it is a completely different world. So the way educated people like you and I look at the world, they look at it, you know, they don't see what we see. And so back then in the 40s, 50s, when my parents were having these children, these were two illiterate people who had spent all their lives in that small place, and so they were totally isolated from the world and all knowledge and whatever. So and it's still.
Is it like that today?
It's still the life, I mean, that people live, and so people have large families that they can't really take care of, and so it's illiteracy, and it's the lack of know-how, and so that's the reason.
One of the things that I've always been astonished by, whether it's just movies that you're looking through or magazines and you read a story or whatever, I mean, not only are you living in a land of poverty, and in many cases, I'd assume either monsoon rains or completely dry heat, but you're in an area that's more or less the jungle with very dangerous animals and snakes and things of that nature. I mean, if I see a Gartner snake, and which is, you know, good for the mice, they'll say, oh, you need that in your yard because that's good for the mice. I'm like, no, get that thing out of here. I ain't touching it. Now, you could put a drug cartel guy across from me. I'm going to sit here. You put a little tiny snake, I'm running. I'm guessing you probably ran into that kind of stuff over the course of time?
It's I wrote a lot about snakes in my memoir.
Oh, God.
So probably skip those chapters if you're afraid of snakes.
So as a child, and you have a snake that may be impeding the home or creating an issue for you to do your farming, you've got to either hope that snake goes away, or did you ever have to go head to head with the snake?
You have to confront it.
And how do you do that without having a gun or any real weapon? What, just with a hoe or a stick?
Yeah. So my father, so this village I'm describing, at one point he left the village, left the family, and moved to even more remote place, so he could get fertile land. I mean, to farm to grow enough crops. Yeah. So that farm was where I spent most of my holidays, summer holidays, working on the farm.
Really?
In this remote jungle, and that's where the poisonous snakes were. And so when you were working on a farm and you were clearing brush, and these snakes will be coiled under brush, and you just come upon them.
Yeah.
You just come upon them.
Had you ever been bit or
No.
You must be quick.
Very amazingly, surprisingly, all those years. I mean, I started going to that farm probably when I was about 9 years old.
Okay.
And then I spent lots and lots of time on that farm till I left Ghana when I was 23 to go to the Soviet Union. So all that time, I mean, I came up on snakes pretty much every day.
What about any other kind of wild animals that would recur? Did you have tigers or anything else like that?
No. So,
thank goodness.
So in Ghana, the forests in Ghana don't have those. Those animals are in East Africa mostly. And,
okay.
So snakes were really the menace, and then there were some insects. What do they call it? Tarantulas and scorpions. I mean, I got bit by a scorpion once on the farm.
Really?
I got bit. Yeah.
All right, so that leads me to my next question. I mean, Mike, are we going to go out to have beers or something like this at some point with this guy? I could have this guy for 9 hours, man. He's the life of the party. So. Scorpion. I was bit by. Think about that, right? For people who aren't watching, my buddy Mike made an introduction to Patrick. I mean, think about this. You know, guys go out when you're young and you're trying to pick up a girl or whatever. Maybe those. Oh yeah, no, I had a tough fight. You're going in. Yeah, I fight snakes. I fight scorpions. I get bit by a scorpion. Really? So this leads me to the next question because, I mean, if I got bit by a snake. I would be in my BMW driving 95 miles an hour to the local hospital and saying, get me with some kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, you're in Ghana.
Yes.
I'm imagining you don't have some kind of emergency room there with, drips. Yeah. How did you guys take care of each other when you actually got sick?
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about, a hospital or local. The jungle where my father was, where his farm was, so this was a place inaccessible to vehicles. To get to that farm, you had to walk through dense forest for about 6 miles.
Yeah.
And there were no roads, and so vehicles couldn't get there. And so that is the thing I think about every single day of my life. My father passed away 23 years ago, 24 years ago.
Okay.
And he passed away before I realized the kind of life he lived on the farm. I mean, I was young. I mean, I knew it was pretty risky for someone to live in that place, so isolated. And so if you got bit by a snake, you were done.
It's over.
Yeah, it's over because somebody will have to carry you on their back. I mean, to walk in 6 miles. I mean, to get to anything, close to a clinic.
All right, so then when let's go to a more simple thing, because here in the United States, if I send my son Ryan outside, I said, Ryan, do me a favor, move those bushes or whatever, and he gets a huge scratch down here. What we're going to do is we're going to put some kind of antibiotic cream on it or whatever, bandage it. My wife's going to make it like, he has a war wound. It's going to be all, everything's going to be there. She's going to have powder on him, the whole thing. He's going to stay for 2 days. Now I can't go to work like this, What happened to you when you took a gash carrying the water or whatever? I mean, how did you guys use kind of any cleanse? What did you do?
Yeah, so these people that we call illiterate, like my father, my mother, I mean, they had knowledge of herbal medicine.
Okay.
So a lot of these, places in the tropics and, I would put Latin America, Southeast Asia, I mean, the poor world.
Yeah.
Where medical, modern medical, technology is not available. I mean, these people have their own local remedies, and they are mostly herbal in nature. I mean, they cut a piece of tree bark and they pound it and they squeeze the juice out of it and they do something with it. And I don't know whether it was placebo or medicine, but
No way, man. Because I'll tell you what, I mean, you look around here, I was telling you about the boxes you see behind me. I also have a CBD company, and that's from a plant. That's from a hemp plant. Okay. And I mean, I've had different ailments before where, here in the United States of America, on the 8th day, God created Pfizer, right? That's what that's all about, right? So you're at the pill mill. And I mean, I tried all different kind of pills, and the one pill made me feel worse than I was. It wasn't until I started using CBD that I was like, wow, my inflammation's gone, or this is gone, or that's gone. So I believe in the natural remedies more than I do than the, I mean, obviously, if your arm is hanging off, you need Western medicine to put it back on. But these other things, I think God gave us the things we needed to eat, to drink, and to heal. And that's probably why those things actually worked. I don't think there's no placebo, Patrick. So now we've painted this picture of this very difficult, challenging life that you were living as a child. But I want to, before I go to the next stage of what kind of changes your trajectory, I want to ask one more thing about the family.
Okay.
In the United States, we have ourselves a major, major issue. Something that you and I are going to talk about in this conversation is that our divorce rate in the United States is off the charts.
Yes.
The family unit has been ripped to shreds, and there is no community that feels it better than the African American community. Fatherless homes in America, number one is the black home.
Yes.
And then if you look at the lowest earner in America, it's the black male. So that is not by chance.
Yes.
So let's go back to Africa for a second now and talk about the importance of family. Now, obviously, you got to eat, you got to drink, and whatever. Was the importance of family the core of everything that was in your daily life?
In my household, it was. Unfortunately, in the village I grew up, you actually had a situation that wasn't too different from the African American experience in America. I mean, so you had families where fathers and polygamy was a culturally accepted practice.
Oh, really?
Yes, and so most men in the village had multiple wives, and then they had lots of children, and so people had lots of, and most of the men, I mean, couldn't really care that much about taking care of their children, and so that was one of the main reasons that kids didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, they didn't know any better.
It was really, I would say, the main reason.
You could make the argument that the same is here in the United States, why we have so many gangs. And you look at these, black young men, and don't get me wrong, we've got Latinos in America and white Americans doing the same thing. But it's what I've experienced, because I've done stuff with gangs and things of that nature, is that usually what you find is a young man who always wanted to have the love of his father, didn't get it, didn't have that feeling of family, didn't have the feeling of community. And so the next way to find that is within a gang, because if there's one thing about gangs, you stick together, we're blood. And that's what it is. They go into that, and unfortunately, gangs are about crime, right, for survival. Thinking about that in terms of crime, I know I picked up something here. I can't remember what part of the website I read this on just before you came in. But it sounded as if one farmer stole from another farmer or something else of that matter, people took things into their own hands, and you actually watched people get beat to death because they stole something.
Yes.
How many people have you seen in your day, especially as a child, be beat to death?
In my village, actually, thankfully, nobody died, from those beatings. I mean,
okay.
Thankfully.
Okay.
I actually saw someone. I didn't see the actual process of beating, but in Accra, the capital, I was walking in the city, and I came upon this body on the ground, and someone had just beating. Some people had just beaten him to death. In my village, it was mostly people stealing farm crops because there was nothing in this place. And going back to the parents, who didn't, bother taking care of, I made mention before about, living in a different world. So these people talking about responsibility, taking responsibility for one's family, oneself. It was a foreign concept. These people were illiterate. This was the life, they had known, all their lives, every, generational thing.
Yeah.
And so there were not that much in terms of expectations, and so people just had these children, and they just did their own thing, and then let the children go off. And if you did some good thing with your life, fine. If nothing good happened, fine. I mean,
Yeah.
but my father and a couple of his friends in the village. I mean, so if you come to my village, there were about 3 or 4 families that I would say took charge of their families, and made sure that everything was intact. I mean, that, you had nothing in the house, but and so that is one of the going out and talking to people nowadays, and actually doing my book. I mean, that was the primary motivation. I mean, to say that. Because I had seen the African American condition that you describe, and I came face to face with that in my classroom when I taught K to 12, and so that is really the ambassador I want to be, because I saw what my father's the way he lived his life, what difference it made in my life and the life of my siblings, and that is key in life.
Oh, goodness gracious. I mean, there's no doubt about that. That message, you could sing that message all day long. But we got to connect the dots here, because we've just gone from, you were in a place of illiteracy. I'm not even going to ask you what it is, the kind of clothing you guys had at that point, right? So you're sitting in front of me. You've got a beautiful watch, beautiful clothes. You're well put together. There's no question that we went from here to here, but there had to be some sort of line that got us there. So at some point, and this is where you're going to have to help fill in the dots, because I don't know enough about the story. At some point, you find a scrap piece of newspaper, and that is the moment that you say has changed the trajectory of Patrick's life. Explain the newspaper, what it said, how you were able to read it, and what motivated you to make the next turn.
Yeah. So I will try to package it. So I talked about the primary school that was in the village. I mean, that was about the only thing there, and the only reason people send their kids to this place was the government mandated primary education, primary middle. So you were about 5, 6 years old, and you were sent there. And so the basic thing you did there was, you learned the alphabet. They taught you the alphabet, and then some arithmetic, counting 1 to 10. That was pretty much it.
Okay.
And so when I came of age, 5, 6, when I was about, there were not enough classrooms. And so, there was a big tree out in there. And so, you brought a chair from home and you sat under this tree. And so that was what everyone did. And so I went through that process, and I learned the alphabet. And there were no books in this place, obviously. And so reading was really not something anyone did. And but after learning the alphabet, there were a couple of books that the teachers had. And so they would read stories out of it and to the class, and somehow I thought I liked the stories that the teachers were reading, and so it became sort of a fascination. So I started picking up this habit of getting really into this alphabet thing, and piecing letters together, and taking interest in that, and so that was the extent of my reading ability.
Okay. Yeah.
And so there were no reading materials or anything. So I was walking in the village square one morning. After a few years, I picked up the ability to read a few words here and there. So I picked up the scrap of a newspaper.
Okay.
Talking about going out to the streets, to buy breakfast. There were no plates, no utensils. When people just tore pieces out of discarded newspapers and wrapped, the food you bought in that. So people finished eating, excuse me, people finished eating, and then they, discard the scrap of it. So that was one of the scraps I picked up, and I read this thing on it. It was a segment of an article that this newspaper had published. I mean, it was the Ghanaian national daily newspaper. So they published this article about the most exclusive secondary school, which is the equivalent of high school here, in the nation, which was located in the capital, Accra. All secondary schools were boarding schools.
Okay.
And so primary education was free. But to go to secondary school, which is high school here, you actually had to leave home to go live in a boarding house in a big town or a big city.
Well, go ahead, wet your whistle, and I'll fill in the blanks for you. So take a sip. So, because you're going to be talking for a while here. So when I think, it's amazing when I think of you getting the scoop of rice, what I'm trying to do is picture in my head the story you're giving me. And I think about the scoop of rice, and I didn't even bother to think, what is the scoop going into? So you're eating it with your hands, I'm imagining, which is just another story of itself. Yeah. But so when you read this little article, it paints for you a picture of what another life can be, to where you can get an education that's going to take another level past of what it is of you just putting letters and sounding them out and getting it.
Yes.
That inspires you to go to this school.
Yes. So
where they have beds.
It's a lot crazier than that. This article is talking about Ghana was a British colony until 1957, when it broke free from the British Empire. Mm-hmm. So the British ruled Ghana until 1957. And so whilst they were there for, I don't know how many decades, probably about 6 decades or so.
Okay.
So they set up institutions to basically educate the children of the expatriates, the governors, the diplomats, and then the Ghanaian elite, the small Ghanaian elite. So that was a secondary school that the British had set up. So it was modeled after Eton College in London.
Okay.
Yeah. So and so this institution in Ghana was located in Accra. So all these elite, children from wealthy homes went there. And then it was a feeder institution to Oxford and Cambridge universities in England.
Talking to some big places.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then they come back to Ghana, and then they become, the British had left, and so Ghanaians were in charge then. And so these people, when they came back from Oxford and Cambridge, they became the president, prime minister, ambassadors, and there's this little kid, standing in this village square, and I read this and I say, hey, I want to be one of those guys.
God bless you. Well, a lot of times that's all it takes, Patrick. It just takes that little spark of you seeing something, even if you're imagining it in your head, and you want to go for it. Yeah. The difference between those who do and do not is basically the difference of people in the world.
Difference.
Yeah, that's the difference, right? So to sort of accelerate things here, you get yourself into school.
Yes.
You educate yourself. Yes. You get to sleep on a bed.
Yes.
Your family, I'm imagining, is still back home in the farm.
Yes.
At that point, are you pretty far separated with them for what would call an extended period of time?
Yeah, during the school term. So I would go to the boarding house, spend about 3-4 months there, and then come back home. And
you mean you wouldn't text them to see how they were doing in between?
No,
there's none of that, right? No, there's none of that. There's none of that. No, it's amazing because we can't think like that. I mean, I just had Michael was talking about how I was interviewed a guy named Bill. He's 80 years old. I'm assuming you'll meet him.
Yeah.
And he drove nuclear submarines.
Okay.
And I was so enthralled by, well, what's the submarine like? And the first thing he said is, it's like being in a closet for 90 days.
Yes.
You don't get to, his children were born. He had no idea. Was it a boy? Was it a girl? Whatever. And the idea of being locked in a tube underwater where you can't even go outside and say, hey, I need a breath of fresh air. I need the sun hitting my face. You can't conceive of it.
Yeah.
So when I think of, you saying, yeah, I'm separated from my family, and your family is so dependent on every link in the chain, they don't know how you're doing, what you're doing. I guess they're just praying for the best.
Yes.
And then when they see you come back after school, they must see a new guy who was sleeping on beds. Now when you go back with them, you're back sleeping on the ground.
Yes. Yes. And working on the farm.
That has to be a driver for you, man, to say, I'm going back to school. I'm going to be number one in my class, right? Because I think it may be one of the greatest things behind your success, and I've only known you now for an hour. It's because, the great thing is we took the guy out of Ghana, but we never took the guy Ghana out of the guy.
Exactly.
And then we actually took it and brought you back. And then you said, oh my goodness, here it is. What a life's lesson. So at some point, you are now educated, and you're going to break out of Ghana, and you're going to move on. And am I right in saying, connecting the dots, you decide to go to the Soviet Union? Or am I skipping too far ahead?
No, that's good. Yeah.
All right.
It's not I decide. I mean, it was I'm bouncing around. I mean, I finished this secondary school. This awesome life, that I have lived on in the boarding school for 7 years. I mean, boarding school was 7 years those days. So I finished that, and I qualified for university in Ghana, and so I get admitted to university in Ghana. The problem was I had to pay something out of pocket to go to university, and a family that is struggling to find 3 meals is not going to be able to give you money to go to college. And so I come back to the farm, talking about, something pulling you back always. So I get pulled back, to sleeping on the floor again. And so I was bouncing around for 2-3 years.
Okay.
Trying to figure out where my life was going next. And then this Soviet exchange program popped up, and I applied for it. I mean, it was the height of the Cold War, and so the Soviet Union and America were all over the map, sort of jockeying for influence. So the Soviets had a heavy presence in Africa.
Okay.
And Ghana, the president of Ghana, soon after independence, started leaning socialist.
Okay.
And so that is how Ghana came to have a relationship with the Soviet Union. And so they had this scholarship program instituted to take young Ghanaians to go educate them in the Soviet Union. And what
was the purpose ultimately?
Great question.
Thank you. That's my job.
Yes. That is something that I have thought about for many years since I went there.
Yeah.
It was unstated, but everyone knew that the purpose was to take young people, go and expose them to socialism, communism. And the hope was that they would come back to Africa, Latin America, and other places, and sort of, plant, the seeds of communism, socialism.
I'm going to totally skip ahead here because I do not want to forget this part.
Okay.
So, as we said off air, is that, I have, for the 20 years that I've been in media and news and politics, immigration has always been my big topic.
Okay.
I got thrown into it. That's a story maybe I'll tell you over a beer or something.
Okay.
But ultimately, I've looked at the topic, both illegal and, legit immigration into the U.S.
Yes.
And the one problem that I have about immigration into the U.S. and the way that we conduct it is that, you've written a book, you are highly educated. I'm guessing we're going to find out you've done very well financially.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you live in the United States?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The one problem I have with this, and Patrick, it has nothing to do with your skin. It has nothing to do with your religion.
Yes.
You can be white from Ireland, and I got a shamrock on my shoulder, okay? And a tattoo.
Yeah.
If the United States continues to take the biggest, the best, the brightest out of these countries, like, you know, where you came from in Ghana and Africa, there's a part of me that believes that those areas will never, ever get out of sleeping on the rug in the dirt. Do I have a point there, or do you push back on that sort of thing? And this is not my way of saying to you, you need to leave and go home.
No.
It's a legitimate question.
Thank you. Thank you. That's I really appreciate that question, because it is something that I struggle with myself. And it is an excellent point. And it is speaking about immigration, it's a subject that I might do a book on it, actually.
I'd like to do it with you.
I might do it. And so the point you made is excellent. It's a crucial point, that's missing in the this whole thing about immigration. And so I am guilty of it. Because I was,
and I don't mean to guilt you.
No.
But it's a legitimate question, because nobody's ever going to blame the guy who lived on a floor, who had to battle snakes, carrying 8 miles of water back and forth, to blame you for having this beautiful Brooks Brothers jacket and a nice watch, and you're going to go out to dinner with Michael, and he's going to take care of you. Trust me, he's done that for me. But nobody can blame that for you to want that. I want that for you. I want that for you. But if we don't take people like you back to Ghana and build that back up, forever, people are going to be living in the dirt. And nobody's ever going to change that to me. And you can tell me that the United States is a rich nation, and I know Trump is cutting off a lot of funding and this and that, but ultimately it's about getting out of corruption. But you can tell me I can send you $1 billion, $10 billion, $100 billion. It won't matter. Until there is a general attitude and leadership in those countries, that money's going to get squandered at the top, and the people at the bottom are going to stay in the bottom. And it's going to be this vicious circle that we need to fix.
And thank you because I don't think I've heard anyone make this point. So explicitly and so succinctly as you've made. And so thank you for that, because it is and so I take full responsibility for that. And so for that very reason, I make sure that I have a heavy involvement in Ghana.
You have to.
And so from here, I'm actually a fellow at a think tank in Accra, and so my expertise is in energy. And so for years, I've tried, to transfer knowledge to. Nowadays, with computers and technology, communications, you can do. You could be anywhere. We could be talking to somebody in Ghana right now if they had it set up. But so that's a big focus of mine to make my presence felt in Ghana and to do something. So I help out financially, knowledge wise, and looking for various ways all the time. But it is not a mainstream sort of focus.
It's not. And because most people, in the same way I said to you earlier on, especially people here in the United States, they'll focus more on who's winning Dancing with the Stars as to who it is that's representing them in Congress or what it is that's going on around the world. We're going to get back to that. Let's put that on the back burner, because that's a deep conversation. And I'm afraid that we don't get more of how it is that you get here and ultimately make the mistake of becoming friends with Michael. But aside from that, that's what we call in movies. That's the pinnacle. That's where the pinnacle changes. Poor guy. Make sure we get a picture of Michael at some point so somebody knows what we're talking about. But I'll make sure I do it. But poor guy sitting there. He didn't know. He thought he would just be sitting there as a bystander. It's just not going to happen.
He's taking hits.
Dude, he knows me good enough. There is no way. First of all, this guy tries to tell me he's a better shortstop than me, a better quarterback. It's not even a chance. Not even a chance. You know it's true, Michael. So anyway, so going back into Soviet Union, and again, I think it's important we get to America. But the Soviets are trying to teach you and educate you, the biggest and the brightest, because they want to take communism, socialism, the dominance, and they want to teach that and have you go back and teach it more. And that's the way you indoctrinate people, right?
Yes.
At some point, you are going to leave that system and fight to get yourself to America.
Yes.
Questions for you on that.
Yes.
When you're a young boy, you're sleeping on the dirt and you're ripping out the scraps.
Yes.
Were you ever given a picture of what America was? Did you even know that there was a thing called America? Or was it not until you got into that first bed that somebody said, hey, America is the shining city on the hill?
It's another great question. So in secondary school, actually in middle school, I got into middle school. A lot of kids in the village would just stop at primary school, but I went off to middle school. And so in middle school, you start getting bits and pieces of knowledge about the broader world. I mean, the rest of Africa, and then that's when you hear about places like America. I mean, the UK, obviously, because Ghana was a colony. I mean, we always knew about them, but. So in middle school, when you're about 12, 13, you start hearing about America and the Western world. And, the Soviet bloc was still quite closed. And so you couldn't really get a lot of information. But we knew about America, United Kingdom, Germany, and the Western countries. So you had an idea. I mean, there were no cell phones. So we had some movies that we watched. I mean, cinema.
Sure, that's going to paint a pretty picture on top of that too.
So you learn about American, sort of movie culture. I mean, through that, and so we knew about America and some of the, sort of the, the movie stars and.
What finally got you here?
So when I finished from the Soviet Union, when I graduated from the Soviet Union, I was actually going to go back to Ghana. My plan was to go back to Ghana. I graduated with my electrical engineering degree. I was actually in the middle of looking for jobs in Ghana, and then a family tragedy hit, and my father died unexpectedly. He was hit by a car, and he died on the spot. And so speaking about the influence and the he had on my life, and being so close to graduation. I was about a couple of weeks away from graduation, and the plan was to come back and retire him from the farm. And he was 81 at the time, and he was still working on the farm. He was still working on the farm. He was still going strong, and my whole idea was to go back home and retire him from the farm and set the family up and help out, and so this tragedy hit, and I was totally lost. I mean, I was totally lost. I mean, I was depression, whatever you name it. So I wasn't.
How old are you now at this point?
Pardon?
How old are you?
I was 1991, so I was 29.
29 years old. All right, so you're a full-fledged man at that point.
Yes, oh yes, and so I lost all interest in everything. I mean, it's like what's the point? I mean,
your hero is gone.
Yeah, the hero is gone. I mean, you look at this man that made so much sacrifice and worked so much his whole life, and then boom, he's gone. And so it was like. Then what's everything for then? And so that's when I made a decision that I couldn't live in Ghana because it was
too painful.
Very, very painful.
Yeah.
And so that is why I decided to get out of Ghana. And at that point it was I didn't mean to actually go away permanently, and but I came to America, and one thing led to
one thing led to the next. So let's get into that, because I want to start talking to you now about some of the stuff we've already talked about with Americanism and stuff of that nature. So you come here to America, and let's just try to consolidate this for the sake of time. But when you come to America, you actually what happens? I mean, do you go to business school? What do you do?
So I just talking about completely lost at that time. So I just picked up a suitcase, and I had applied for an American visa in Moscow, in the American embassy in Moscow. I mean, I had traveled Western Europe throughout, I mean, when I lived in the Soviet Union. So I wanted to come see America at some point. So that's the reason I took the visa. So
was it hard to get the visa?
As a student, no.
Okay.
It wasn't
relatively easy. Fill out an application. Okay,
yeah,
come on in.
Application, and that was it. So I come to America, and so I had really nothing in mind when I came to America. I mean, it's like a lot of immigrants have come here. I mean, they just fly into New York and
see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens.
Yeah.
So I land in New York, and the only person I know in America happens to be a medical student in Buffalo, New York.
Okay.
So that's the only place I can go, find a place to, sleep on the floor for maybe a couple of weeks and see what happens. So I take the bus from, New York City to Buffalo.
Long ride.
Yeah, and I get to Buffalo, and so I'm hanging out with my friend in his apartment. I mean, he gets up in the morning and he goes to medical school. I mean, he's a busy medical school student, and so I start watching American television. I mean, that's the only thing I can do. So I start watching American television, and I'm watching American society. I mean, through television programs, and I see people debating all kinds of issues, and I mean, going from Ghana, a pretty basic society, and then I had seen, both the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc, and the Western Europe. So I knew the difference.
Yeah.
But then I came to America, and this place looked totally different.
What was it like the first time? And I'm sure this isn't the first time in your life that you ever see any of this. You probably saw it in the Soviet Union, wherever it may be. But when you come to America, one of the things that is astonishing, I mean, I could take you right behind us right now, and there's no less than 3 restaurants that are sitting there, and we could go to the dumpsters, and you will see breads and meats and fruits and everything thrown out, and you got rats having a field day. I mean, when you first saw the amount of waste and throwaway, and then the portions that you get when you go to the restaurants and everything. I mean, it's almost like the same thing as when you went into a bed for the first time. What's it like when you're sitting there and saying, my goodness, I'm taking hot showers, I'm on tile, I've got this nice white, I mean, it's not hard to fall in love with what America offers, What about the waste?
The waste is something that I have a big problem with. I've come to love America. People call me more American than the Americans themselves. And the thing that made America attractive to me was the openness of this place.
In what sense? That openness?
The nature of the debates people had.
Okay.
The
freedom of speech.
Yeah, freedom of speech. The way people attacked problems.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I had been everywhere, and I had never seen people take basic human problems and address them, discuss them, and try to find ways to solve them. I mean, that was the fascination with American society.
Look where you come from. You come from a place where when Joe stole Jimmy's apples, he got beat almost to death.
Vigilante justice.
Here it's sort of like, all right, you're going to go to court and you're going to make your argument on why you needed to steal the apples. So completely different story, and you're seeing this new kind of system. I mean, this is like taking somebody from one world into another world, right?
Yes.
So you're liking this, and this is saying to you, hey, I want to get involved in this game. I want to do that. So what kind of career path does this take you in?
So what my lucky break was when I studied in the Soviet Union. I was an engineering major, but they had this program where you could take Russian language certification. And then when you went back to your home country, you could teach Russian as a foreign language teacher. I mean, just on the side, people. So I took this, and so I held a Russian teaching certificate. I knew the Russian language pretty well. I mean, because everything was in it, and so And so I had my engineering degree and I had this teaching certificate. So I come to Buffalo. Soviet Union had dissolved probably 6 months by the time I got to Buffalo. And so we have this wave of Russian Soviet immigrants coming to America. And so the couple of magnet schools in Buffalo had decided that they wanted to offer Russian, to the kids in the schools. And so I'm in my friend's apartment, and he brought home the Sunday Buffalo News, and then I was skipping the ads section, and I see this ad about they were looking for Russian language teachers. So I say, hey, that's me.
Yeah.
So I it was a Sunday, so I didn't sleep that night. I wake up Monday morning, and I was the first person standing at the door of the Buffalo Board of Education with my teaching my certificate in hand. And so I walk into the office when it opened, and I show up and I say, hey, I'm here to apply for the job. And they say, get out of here.
You know how to speak Russian? Because at that point, you could have said to somebody,
Yeah.
yeah,
exactly.
And they said, oh, you know Russian.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
wouldn't even
yeah.
know it. Yeah. You didn't do that.
Yeah.
You're
So,
too honest of a guy.
yeah, so I had my certificate, so I showed them.
course,
I said,
of course.
yeah. So I get a job on the spot, and
Yeah, of course.
and then I become a teacher, and so I started teaching in the public school in Buffalo, and they find out I'm an engineer, so they asked me to teach math in addition to Russian.
Oh, wow.
So I'm doing this, and I knew at that point that I wanted to go to graduate school to get my master's in engineering. So I did that teaching for a couple of years, and then went to graduate school to get an engineering master's degree. Then I started working in industry.
Yeah, okay, so before we get to industry, I want to ask a very important question here. So as an immigrant coming over,
Yes.
and you have really no money to your name, right? Maybe a couple of shekels. Yeah. Now you're out, you're working, you're being a teacher, and now obviously you're starting to save some money.
Yeah.
I mean, graduate school is not cheap. So was it easy for you to get grants or scholarships from schools?
So that's a great question. So that's and I was lucky in that sense. I mean, the great thing about engineering is the master's, the graduate degrees in engineering. They have research, engineering research. So all these professors get grants from both the government and the private sector to fund research programs. So my major in electrical engineering was power systems. So when I was applying to engineering, I applied to do research. And so as a research assistant to a professor, you get paid. You get paid an assistantship. And then so they pay you a tuition, which is a great deal. And then you get a stipend for doing research and publishing the result of your research. And my lucky break was, we talk about electric vehicles a lot nowadays.
Yeah.
Back in 1994, when I was applying to graduate school, that was sort of the beginning of people talking about electric vehicles and all this. So I decided to apply to. I applied to a bunch of places, but the school my heart was really set on was Purdue University in Indiana.
In Purdue, yeah.
Purdue University. So thankfully I got in, and then I found a professor that was doing some research studies. So he invited me to the campus to come and speak with him about some research project. So so people had started thinking about the impact that if electric vehicles became a dominant part of the transportation fleet, what impact was that going to have on the electrical grid?
Of course.
And so utilities and a bunch of companies had given some grants. I mean a bunch of schools, Purdue included, to do research into that question. So this professor had received some grants from a bunch of utility companies, and so he was looking for a graduate student to do that work, and so he hired me to do that.
Do you talk about this in your book?
Just briefly.
Briefly.
Yeah.
And the name of the book, let's get it in here now. The name of the book is The Boy from
Boadua.
Say it again.
The Boy from Boadua.
Boadua.
Yeah. Which is the name of the village I grew up in.
Right. And for people who listen to this and not seeing, because we will put the name on the bottom, but for people who listen to the podcast only, spell the town.
It's Boadua.
Okay, so this way when they're on Amazon or wherever it is, they could search for it.
Boadua, yes.
So let's leave some of that because I want to have time to speak to you about your perception of America today, where we are in the world, and what needs to be done in order to really improve things. I don't know how much you've had conversation with Michael. I don't even know if I've ever had this conversation with Michael, but I guess you're going to have it after tonight.
Yeah.
I have at various different times because of the work that I've done, and especially when you're on TV and if you're on Fox News and stuff, and I used to be on all the time on all the major shows.
Okay.
So you get the people who start telling you, you need, like I said to you, you need to go back to Ghana and you need to run for office because you're the kind of person.
Yeah.
So they'd say, we need you in office, especially with our immigration problem here in the United States. And so I remember one time I was on Fox News and this woman, Megyn Kelly, she had the biggest show.
Okay.
And
this was in New York?
This is in New York, yeah. So I'm not from Florida. I'm originally from New York and I moved here for 4 years ago.
Okay.
And so Megyn Kelly had the biggest show on cable news.
Okay, yes.
And so I was one of her biggest guests.
Okay.
And so we had a governor here in Florida going back a while ago. Trump wiped him off the face of the earth, named Jeb Bush. You may remember him.
Yes.
So we were having an incredible amount of surge at the border during Barack Obama's presidency.
Yes.
And they asked him what his position was on illegal immigration. And he said, and you may be able to appreciate this, not that you came here illegally, but that it's an act of love. And what that did is that struck a chord very negatively with a lot of conservatives and Republicans in the United States, of which I'm one.
Yeah.
And as a person who made 4 films and was down at the border and saw some of the different things and actually went in and saw the homes where they weren't living on carpet, but where 5 families were sitting in one sardine can of a small home, and it was like, how are you living like this? You know, where sheets were pinned to landscaping, weed whack wire, and that was the wall in a living room, right? So everybody got a partition. And I remember Megyn said to me, I want you to comment on this. And I looked into the camera, almost the equivalent of you looking into the camera, and I looked at the camera and I said, I am tired of people who want to run for the United States of America worrying about what they're going to do about immigrants and illegal immigrants before we take care of our own. Take care of our own. As soon as we get everybody on the path to the American dream, then we go and help the rest of the world, and we will do it. But we have to take care of our own because when you go on an airplane, even if you're with your kids, in your case, half the airplane, but I mean, but if I'm on my kids and there's an emergency and those masks drop down, the first thing they say is put the mask on yourself before you do it on your kid, even though that is not a natural thing. Your father would have given you the mask first. But the reason is that you can't take care of your child if you're not breathing.
Exactly.
And that was my point. Well, the next day, she got bombarded with, we want Dennis Michael Lynch to run for Senate, we want him to run for governor, we want him to run for president. So I know what that feels like, and I know what it thinks. And then what you start to do is you start to dabble it in your own head. Should I really be doing that instead of doing this, and whatever it may be? When the topic of immigration comes up, whether it is legal immigration to a guy who got a visa to come here and go to Purdue, or an illegal alien who crosses over the border because they want to make $20 an hour instead of $20 a year, the argument becomes, look, it's got to be America first. And then the other side will say, well, that's very racist. You're a racist. Now, I've been sitting with you now for an hour and 15 minutes. I don't think I come across as a racist, and I'm not. How do you feel as an immigrant when I say, I like what Trump is doing because he is taking America First principles, putting it into place, and at the same time reaching his hand around the world and saying, we are going to help you, but I have to set things straight here first.
Yeah.
I'll still protect Israel from the dangers of, the terrorists, and I'll still do whatever I got to do. Whatever, I'll talk to you, Mr. Zelensky, or whatever. Yeah. I'll stop the war, but I got to take care of my home first. Yeah. Do you see justification in that, or do you have problems with that?
It is. Everything you've said is legitimate, okay. And the one of the biggest problems I have with America, I mean, I described to you the America I found, I mean, when I came here in 1992. The saddest thing about this country for me now is we've stopped listening. I mean, listening doesn't happen anymore. And so
describe that, go deeper.
Yes. So we see a truism, something that is a very basic fact. And so for example, you describe thousands and thousands of people crashing the southern border. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows, I mean, that's not sustainable. No. But you cannot say it because of what you describe. I mean, charges of
fear of being a racist
and things like that. But I am an immigrant. I am someone who struggled through life, and so I know what the people who are trying to come in here. I know their motivation.
Of course.
But no nation can sustain that, and so to address that problem, properly, is to I take your point about deal with this country first, mm-hmm. and make sure that it's not being destabilized in a way that sort of the southern states. Like Texas, Florida, I think had to deal with it. It is a problem. If I lived in one of these places and I had thousands and thousands of people coming in uncontrolled, I mean, I would see that as a problem. And so to me, it is a problem. And anyone who says it isn't a problem is not being realistic. Right?
Yeah, there was just a report out by J.P. Morgan, and J.P. Morgan had addressed that there was a housing crisis here in the United States, and they admitted that we're about 1.5 million homes short. And when they did their analysis and actually dug in, they said one of the biggest problems driving this is mass immigration, both legal and illegally, because we're taking in so many people that the infrastructure hasn't been built around that. Mm-hmm. And so now it's a supply and demand issue. Mm-hmm. And what winds up happening is that the American citizen sees themselves in a financial problem because the prices of rent have gone up, the prices of purchasing a home have come up. Yeah. And this is one time, I mean, I've been interested in real estate the majority of my adult life. Mm-hmm. This is one time when the cycle of up and down, or the ebb and flow of real estate market, hasn't hit a bottom like it hit a top. It's almost like it went and then it's like kind of stabilized. And I said, wow, because I've been waiting like 2 years now to buy some cheap homes and then sell them for a lot of money. And I said, I can't do it because they're not going cheap. Why is that? And that's because the supply and demand continues to continue because of the amount of people coming in. Yeah. So when you speak to an American citizen, and I think you would get this at a 9 out of 10 people, then the one that you don't, you throw that person away because they are a racist or whatever. I think what happens is that you hear those people say, look, I'm all for helping. Especially a guy who's sleeping on a rug in Ghana, right? I'm all for helping him. But at the end of the day, if I got to help him, and that means that I got to pay $2,000 for rent instead of $1,000 for rent, and I can't eat breakfast, I got to take care of me first. And that is the situation right now in this country, where in my studying this left and right, I don't think you can fix that without what I call tough love. In the same way that your father probably gave you a little tough love if you dropped the water on your way back, right? When you come from the river. So if we could get tough love into place and people realize that it's not driven by hate and racism, but really driven by the almighty we need to survive,
Yeah.
maybe people look at it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your sense, I mean, you came here legally. When you see people who come here illegally and then really abuse the system, does that upset you, or do you still find that as something as where you can understand it because of where they originate from?
I have a lot of empathy because I see myself in all these people.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I see myself, and I we all, I don't know whether it's we all, but landscaping.
Sure.
We have jobs around our houses that a lot of these immigrants, and so you come into contact with these people. And they are some of the hardest working and the most humble people. So I have a lot of empathy. But when you see, caravans of 10,000 people streaming, coming towards this place, you have to know that it's not possible to absorb. And when you close your eyes to that, you end up creating a problem for these people that you say you love and you want to empathize with, because sooner or later, exactly as you describe, it's going to create this giant backlash where people say, all right, that's it, let's close the border, right?
You can't do it any other way.
Yeah. So it's either you face up to it. And recognizes it's a problem, and make sure that it's not overwhelming, right? If it's not a lot of human beings, are inclined, to help other humans, when they don't feel overwhelmed. But when any problem becomes overwhelming, then people say, all right, I'm done, right? So that is what immigration has become. So to answer your question, because of the way I grew up and where I come from, I just like those people, and every single one of them. If I were living down there, I'll probably be making the attempt myself.
You look at some of the biggest businesses in the country right now, or just even some of the smallest, most successful businesses in the country, in the state, in the town. Many times you're going to find a first-generation immigrant because they do come from the sort of situation you came from, and they understand this is an opportunity that my kids don't understand. Like, my kids are good kids; they're hardworking kids, but at the same time as they've had a really nice path. When they were born, it was like, oh, which onesie do we want to put on them? I don't like either one of them. Buy another one. And now it's, Amazon's going to drop it at my door, and if it's not here by tomorrow at 12, I'm screaming at somebody why it's not here.
That's my son.
Yeah. So there you go. Right. So you let your kid become like my kid, right? Listen, in one dad to the next. You're not too far away. I think maybe what you should do is have your son sleep on the floor. In fact, Ryan, you're sleeping on the floor for the next 3 nights.
You're not going to find that kind of floor anyway.
Right. Next time you give me crap about what it is that we give you for breakfast, you're sleeping on the floor. In fact, and you're going to go to the deli and get your water. It's a mile that way and a mile back. And get me one too.
Face some snakes also.
Face some snakes is right. So, but that's an important thing that you just said. So if your dad was here right now and he saw how his grandson was living and maybe was of the mindset that Ryan is, would your dad be happy for him or be disappointed in that part of Americanism that is pissed off that our latte is 2 minutes too late?
Yeah. He was a very practical man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he saw the world, through simple, lenses. So he would actually be happy.
He'd be happy for him.
Yeah, he would be happy for him. He would, he believed that, it's important to earn your way through life. Yeah. Take charge and earn your way through life. So he would be happy that he's comfortable, and because of the way I grew up, I mean, I make a lot of demands in my own house.
Good.
Yeah, and so my daughter, my son, I mean, I don't make life easy for them. Yeah,
That's the way it's got to be.
yeah,
That's the way it's got to be.
yeah.
So let's go over. Let's go from the immigrant community. So I think one of the things that we could agree on, and if I'm wrong, tell me. Please, it makes it for a better conversation.
No,
My feeling is that we need to close the borders for a long period of time. We need to limit legal immigration almost to a stop because, and keep in mind, I lived 9/11. I ran from the buildings.
yes,
If we cannot vet the people who are coming into our country, then what winds up happening is that's a form of chaos. And I think the difference between America and the third world is chaos, the rule of law.
yes,
Because people will say freedom is what makes America great. No, there's plenty of countries that are free, but they don't have the rule of law.
Yeah.
And without the rule of law, whether it's in a square little building with 16 family members or in a border town, if you don't have the rule of law, you have chaos. And if you have chaos, you're third world.
yes,
And in many aspects, the immigration problem in this country has become third world-like. And it needs to stop. And we could get our affairs in order. We could get our vetting processes in place. We can make it a little bit easier for somebody who wants to come in here, and we'd love to have them come in here. Make it a little bit easier so they're not waiting for 10 years or whatever it may be. Our immigration system right now is set up based on who, I mean, if you wanted to petition for your 12 siblings, or 13 siblings, 12 because 2 had passed, you can do that. You can make it a petition for them. Whereas many of us will say, wait a second, I'm sure the family is beautiful, but at the end of the day, can we cherry pick who we need right now? Because, and here's another thing, if we take a lot of Patricks over and we put them in the Purdue system, fantastic, because look what he turned out to be. But there was an American who didn't get that space because Patrick took that space. And this is going to be the argument, Patrick, that's never going to find a solution. So what I propose, and love to talk to you about this, is that we slow it down, almost put it to a little stop, get our affairs in order. Just like Mike and I have to tell our wives to put the American Express card down, let me pay the bill, and then let's slowly get it back up again. And then we can open up our doors. If you disagree with that, because we're leaving people in squalor for too long, push back on me.
No, I think you make a fair point. Because of the way the problem had become, had grown to become in probably the last I don't know how many years, 4, 6 or whatever years it's been. So yeah, it's a fair point. But the only point I would make is America. The reason I have come to love America so much is because of what it stands for in the world.
How would you describe that to somebody back in Ghana?
To me, you talk about chaos. What I've seen out there in the rest of the world, because of where I came from and what I've seen. Without America in this world, this world will quickly descend into a jungle. Into a jungle, and so. America is called an indispensable nation. I don't know who coined I think Madeleine Albright or whoever coined the term. It's called that for a reason. And I completely believe that. And so for me, the American immigration system, it does a variety of things. So asylum, asylum is, most migrants are economic migrants who come here, economic. And then the asylum system, which, has, in fact been abused because
totally abused.
Everyone who comes here claims asylum, which
well, because at some point, and it's funny how that switched. It's when I first started in immigration and making my films on the border and illegal immigration, you never heard of asylum or asylum claim, because an asylum claim was you really had to prove that you were at risk for whatever it was. And then people just came up, and if you asked them, why are you coming here? I want to get a job. I heard there's job openings in landscaping and housing and whatever. And then at some point when we were shutting things down, somebody said, say you're here for asylum, and no joke, I watched it myself, handed them a sheet that said, this is what you say when you go there. And so the United States immigration system is set up in such a way where there's no limits on how many asylum seekers we can take in. No limits at all. So there's limits on visas, there's limits in parolee programs, but not when it comes to asylum. And that's why it was abused, and that's why we're looking to do it, to eliminate that. I agree in the fact that there are aspects of our immigration system that need to be improved. But at the same time, our big problem, Patrick, is not that we don't have a good immigration system, it's that we don't have good enforcement. And there's never been a will to enforce anything, because people want cheap labor and they want cheap votes and all the different reasons. And for the Democrat Party, they want to change the, let's just call it the complexity, and I don't mean, the complexion, the complexity of this country. They want it to be where there's a lot of migrants who are coming in and who become dependent on the government, and they're always going to vote for that. Whereas the Republicans have always said, hey, listen, I don't want to pay Ryan Lynch $35 an hour when I could get that for $8 an hour from somebody who's over here. So we've got to fix that and put in place. When you look at the way that Trump is handling it, are you, as an American, are you okay with the way he's handling it, or do you think he's going about it too abruptly?
I have quite a few problems with the way Trump conducts affairs.
In what sense?
The abruptness of
The brashness
of his actions, and so I'm actually going to write a little piece about this very thing, talking about immigration. He has a good point about getting control of over the borders. And streamlining this whole immigration thing. I mean, there are positive things about it. We take people who are persecuted for whatever reason, political, religious. I think that part of the system needs to be sort of preserved, because
I agree with you 100%.
Because that's what this country stands for.
What separates us from the rest of the world.
Yes. And,
is it that
just the way he talks about things. I mean, there was something in the news yesterday or 2 days ago about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
Yes.
This is something that America has held, as sway over, many, countries, and, trying to maintain, standards about, governance, clean governance.
Yes.
When you look at the reasons for migration, a lot of that is because of dysfunctional governments in many of these places where people come from.
Absolutely.
And this dysfunctional government comes about because of corruption.
So what you're fearing is that by him eliminating that program, he's going to allow corruption to actually fester.
So he's enabling, the very things, he should be doing the opposite of a lot of the things, I wouldn't say a lot of the things, that in particular.
Well, in that particular one, you're talking about a policy, so you disagree with the policy. But in other ways, I mean, there's a fair argument. I mean, there is a fair argument. You make a good point. It's not always necessarily what he says, and sometimes it's just how he says it. And if he could deliver, you catch, somebody's got to tell him this along the way. Maybe it will be me. But, you catch more bees with honey than you do with, tack paper. But I mean, I think, USAID right now is a prime example. It's not that Trump doesn't want to help. We don't want to help. It's that we don't want to be buying $50 million of condoms for another country. It just doesn't make sense. And doing these other programs that don't seem to be going anywhere. It's very disturbing when you hear hey, we've given, I don't know what it is, $150 billion to Zelensky. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, I've only gotten 75 of it. I don't know where the other money is. So we're trying to stop everybody pulling from the bank. And I think once you settle things down, then you could take a look at the landscape and then maybe have somebody who's a little bit less brash and maybe a little bit more heady. Could be Elon Musk. Who knows?
And I actually don't have, I actually think the way he does, some things, some of his pressure tactics are actually, beneficial and positive. I see some benefits because, for example, you talk about immigration from, from the southern border. He threatened tariffs and issued some threats, and all of a sudden, the president of Mexico is going to put 10,000 troops, to help stem the flow of migrants, and
we just got to make sure that stays up. But,
which begs the question. I mean, why did it have to take a brash person issuing threats? I mean, for someone to to do what they should have done. And so we don't always it's like when I got caned as a student, as a young boy in the village. I mean, they cane you when you come to school late. And so sometimes you have to use a big stick. And so his use of the big stick in some cases is useful.
I think that at this point in America, if I could kind of translate this to somebody who is an immigrant and maybe doesn't understand the way that he's taking his approach. If he was taking this approach and it was the first time, let's go back another way. Let's use it in the idea of the caning. If the first time that you came into school late, you got caned, I say that's completely unfair. But on the fifth time that you got caned, you learned your lesson, you didn't come in late again, unless you had a very valid excuse. I think the way Americans are looking at this, and I don't mean to disconnect you from this. I'm talking about ones that are not immigrants. I think that the way that we look at this is, hey man, we have been giving you aid, we have been giving you resources, we've been the nicest person, turning a blind eye, saying, can you please stop this from happening? Although we should take accountability that we like that cheap labor and we are using all the cocaine and the heroin that you're sending over, but can you please stop it? And so Americans are seeing it's not stopping. And finally, you got somebody who's taking the cane out and saying, hey, I know how to hurt you. You're going to take 25% less than you were yesterday. And oh, by the way, Venezuela, you're not going to take back your migrants? Okay, guess what? I was going to take them for you, but now you're going to get your plane on your dime, come pick them up, get these people, get them out of my country, or else I'm going to destroy your economy. Now, I don't really think Trump wants to destroy anybody's economy. I just think he wants to level the playing field, and he has no choice but to take the cane out and start going like this, because the diplomacy hasn't been getting us anywhere, and that's what the attitude is at this point. And
I understand the frustration as a native African. Someone who grew up in Ghana. I mean, I've reached a point a long time ago where I think foreign aid, a lot of foreign aid is doing more harm than good. I mean, and so if someone, I don't know all the details about USAID and a lot of stuff have come out in the news about some of the stuff the money was doing. I mean, the average person like me, I mean, doesn't really have knowledge of what's going on there, but I know a lot about foreign aid. Traditional foreign aid. I mean, to places like Ghana, Nigeria, and to Ghana, I know for a fact that cutting it back, traditional foreign aid to government, government to government official foreign aid, cutting it back, I wouldn't have a problem with that because it's done. It's lining people's pockets. I mean,
it's done the wrong way. There's no accountability.
And then it is stopping the country, I mean, from taking responsibility, taking charge of what it needs to do itself, I mean, to get it. Because if somebody keeps feeding you, for 50 years, I mean, you're going to be dependent, and
Of course.
you're not going to do what you need to do.
It's
And
the
so,
old
yeah.
saying, Patrick, I will teach you to fish all day long, but I'm not going to fish for you. And so I want to have one more topic here before we wind this up, and then we're going to talk about how people can get the book and what you're doing with yourself today and everything else like that. But I want to go into the African-American communities here in the United States, because I have done a lot of work in this area. And I go back to the statistic I gave you before. I'm even going to take it a bit higher. So the statistic in terms of top earners in the United States: Asians, whites, Latinos, blacks. Households without fathers at home, leading blacks, Latinos, whites, Asians. That's not coincidental. There is a pattern there. You could see where it fits. I have gone, my wife has said she was going to divorce me many a times for this stuff, but I have gone into some of the most dangerous places in South Chicago and Detroit. And I've literally said to the person driving around, stop, I'm getting out. I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? And I get out and I'd see a guy all tattooed or whatever it may be. And I said, you know what, this guy's not going to shoot me. Hey, I'm from Fox News. Can I ask you a couple of questions? And I mean, this is a guy who, otherwise looked like he was going to beat the shit out of me just for the fun of it, right? So he says, yeah, come on over. So I go up to him and I said, look, if you don't mind, I'm going to get my camera. Get your camera. So I said, this is a hellhole. Half of these houses are all boarded up. The broken windows. I said, your house is like one of the anomalies on the block here. I don't see anybody else hanging out here. What happened? And the guy says, it used to be a beautiful community. We're a beautiful community. He's like, and then these politicians come in and they make us these promises, whatever it may be, and they don't do it, and the businesses go away. And when the businesses go away and you don't have jobs, people go away. And when people go away, you lose community. And then you have nothing else to do. And then you ultimately have no other choice but to learn how to steal things, because it's the only way you're going to stay alive. And I said, well, what about all the fathers taking off? And he said, yeah, it's the biggest problem we face. There's not a single father on this entire neighborhood that I can point to and say, this guy has stayed there and worked like your dad did. Are you disappointed in the black communities that there hasn't been leaders to stand up and say, we need to take accountability. We need to stop blaming everybody else and start, pointing the finger at us? Because there's an old analogy. If I point the finger at you, I got three fingers pointing back at me. So what's your take on that? Because I did read a little bit that you do believe that there is some racism here in the United States. So I'm curious to see what it is that you think on that.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, it's a big problem for me that fathers. It is the biggest problem in the community, and so I don't know what it's. And so talking about leadership, putting this problem front and center. I mean, you don't see enough of that, and people dance around it. It's they make all kinds of excuses for it, but it is one of these problems that. You need to confront it, head on. I mean, it is what it is, and you can't really talk about it any other way. Because you bring children into the world. You make a choice. I mean, to bring children into the world. I mean, the thing that makes me sad the most nowadays. I mean, to see children. Who don't have adults in their lives, and you see that in Ghana as well. I mean, and a child. I mean, the way I love and treat my two children. I mean, once you become a parent, I mean, you realize the bond between a parent and a child, and so my son. My son, the way he depends on me for, pretty much not for material things, but for guidance.
Of course. Without it, they're lost.
And for me to think that there are boys like him I mean, who don't have somebody to direct them and to, for them to go talk to when they have it breaks my heart. And so, it is a very, very important problem for me. And to answer your question, I'm disappointed that it's not, it's not prioritized.
It's not. And
it's not
I think if you
prioritized.
look at it, if you look at the dual issue there, is that if you have a guy like me who's pearly white and, they'll say I have my privilege. Let me tell you something. I was poor, not like you, but I mean, my mother was out working 2 jobs. We were a single family. There were nights when my brother and I went to bed without any dinner because she was working. And by the time she came back, we had passed out and done our own homework. So every dollar I have, whether it's my boat, my car, my home, or where my vacations, I have earned through hard work because like you, I respected my family, but I didn't want to have the life for me that my family had to go through in that level. And so I worked my ass to get out of that. And my children have been able to see what the world can be in America. And you better appreciate America for what it is that we have. And that's why we have our podcast. So this way we could defend what we believe has been a gift to us. If I go out and I say on Fox News or anywhere, well, we need to have more fathers staying home so A, their sons aren't getting into gangs, and B, that their daughters are not dropping their pants at 12 years old and getting pregnant at 13 years old. We need some guidance and that stuff will end. I'm automatically blasted as a racist and I probably won't be invited back on because it's not politically correct. And at the same time, to your point, you get a black man. And it's very, very often that you'll hear that, it's racist. I don't have any opportunities. Where if you have somebody like Dr. Ben Carson, who I actually consulted for when he was running for president, and it's funny, he says the same thing to me. He said, that's a great question. That's a great question. But it's a great man. He was as poor is in the United States of America. And grew up to be the #1 neurosurgeon in the world, ran for president, and worked in an administration. So don't tell me it can't happen. And here's something you probably don't know, or maybe you do, but there was a school named after Ben Carson where he grew up in Detroit. And when Trump won the first election and took Carson to be in his administration, the school took the name off the school. What kind of message does that send? You know what I mean? And that's where the problem is. So we need to have a leadership role where African-American men are getting up there, successful men, and working with their communities, or else it's never going to change.
It's and that's the point I was making about it has become impossible to have conversations in this country. I mean, it's not America it came to see in 1992. Now, the way you're describing if you took that position on TV, people automatically, brand you as something. I mean, it's not a message it's not the words you said. I mean, it's the person who said it and the way the person looks. And to me, that's our problem. That's our national problem.
Now, the other part of that, and this is my last question for you on this topic, is that if you take me out and you put what I just said in your lips and you go on television, people are going to say, I love that guy, except for maybe your own community is going to come back and say, you know what? Are you a white guy now? Because I see who you drove up here with. You got a pearly white guy with you. You're hanging out with white guys. Do you get that? Do you get any pushback in terms of the fact that like you sold out?
I haven't been out in public that much.
Really?
Speaking about this stuff.
So this is new for you, this whole new talking and going out? Because I know you're giving a talk here in the next day or so, right?
Yeah, well, not on this particular topic.
Oh, on this topic. Okay.
And with black audiences.
Oh, okay.
That is, so that's what I mean. I haven't really had the opportunity yet, I mean, to stand in front of black audiences to deliver this kind of message. Right?
We need to change that. So in terms of you are going to be giving a speech here locally, although my show is nationally. So I'm not going to push it for you because nobody's going to go. I mean, I'm watching around the country. So in that sense, when you are giving your talks, right, and you're on that circuit, what is the overall 1 minute, 2 minute explanation here of what it is that your message is? What are you talking about?
What I talk about is mostly the lessons I've learned, going from that little tiny village through the Soviet Union to America. America is where I've spent the longest part of my life. I've been here for 33 years now.
33.
And so lessons learned. Hard work, family, sacrifice, perseverance. Those I boil down, lessons learned, and my main takeaway is, if this little, black boy with illiterate parents, from a tiny dusty village can do this, then, don't tell me you can do it.
So it's a story of motivation.
Yes.
It's a story of dreams can come true
Yes.
if you connect your head with your heart. I
Yes.
love that message.
Yes.
I love the message. One more time, the name of the book?
The Boy from Boadua.
Yes. And
yeah.
I will tell you this. I'm not a BS artist at all. I will tell you that tonight when I go home, I am buying your book. And that's why
I actually have a signed copy for you.
Oh, well, take the signed copy. Save me the 25, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, whatever it is. Good. Anyway, I was going to have Mike pay for it, but he's got more money than me. So anyway, or at least his wife does.
Yeah.
But,
That's fine.
but anyway, the thing about that, I love the fact that you put it into a book and then you're out there doing it.
Yeah.
But I really think where your message has to be given is within those Black communities, because that's where it needs it most.
Yeah.
And I'm sure along your journey, you're going to meet people who are going to be able to connect you in that way.
And I'm working my way through that. Trying to figure out how to and for me it's not even Black. It's disadvantaged. Children. You find white,
of course,
kids. Who are from broken homes and poor homes, and Latino boys.
Of course.
Boys and girls, and so it's sort of a universal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to get to the point where I'm speaking to more of those types of kids, and telling them what's possible and how to what steps to
right.
These things I discovered them by accident, really. Because there was nobody leading me, like my parents couldn't do it because they had no idea about education. We didn't have guidance counselors in our schools, and so I was just bouncing around and learning these things on the go, and I ended up discovering quite a few things that I think can benefit.
And I think your story, from what I know of it, and definitely here today, it's a universal story that can be plugged into female, male, white, Black, Asian, polka dotted. It doesn't matter who it is. However, the reality of the world is what the reality of the world is. And there's, I think of a movie from South Africa, I think it was called Invictus, about the Nelson Mandela story and how it is that he used the rugby team in South Africa. And there are scenes in the movie, I just watched it about 2 months ago, there's scenes in the movie where the entire team is all white with the exception of one Black fellow who was on the team. And when one of the ways that Nelson Mandela tried to bring the country together to break that racial divide was to take the rugby team right around the U.S., not the U.S., the World Cup or whatever they do for rugby.
Yeah, 94.
He took the team around to very poor Black community villages. And when the kids saw the big buses come in, their eyes lit up, because these are kids who are sleeping on the dirt just like you were. And it was like, the team is here. But in the movie anyway, they always had it where they just showed a little bit more love to the one guy on the team. I think his name was Scooter or something like that, where they went to him. And I think that if you and I, let's say for instance, we had the same amount of money, the same amount of success, there wasn't a real difference between our resumes other than the color of our skin. And if we went into a school that was predominantly all Black, and I gave my story and you gave your story, and it was unequal, you're still going to get through to them better because of the association. There's just no way else around it. That's the reality of it. I've given speeches in those things. I've given them to Latinos. I've given them to Black community and what have you. And if the message is always the same, but I've watched it. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just, I can't figure it out. God set it up that way where we look differently, we do whatever it may be, but in the end, we're all the same people. So I wish I had 5 hours. I don't even think because I have so many more questions, but I'm going to open up the book and I got a feeling I'm going to get a lot of answers. I got to tell you something. You're a gentleman, well-spoken, just what an unbelievably great story you have. And I will tell you, I've interviewed countless people You're one of my favorite to date because it really is a story of not only survival, but just casting a stone and saying, all right, I'm going to land where that ripple effect was. And just really, I mean, not to be condescending, I'm so proud of your story. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
And God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're very, very kind. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Where do you live, by the way? What state?
I live in Pennsylvania.
Live in Pennsylvania.
My family and I, we live in Pennsylvania.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a little cold there for me.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much
I
for
appreciate it. I hope we sell a bunch of books.
Yeah.
All right, bud.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for us this week on Life After 50. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did conducting it. Be sure to take a look at his book, The Boy from Boadua. It's a great one. I read it myself. It is truly inspiring. Also, don't forget to support this podcast. Go to dmlcbd.com/mug, M-U-G, and get yourself the same coffee cup that I and my guests drink from. Use coupon code LIFE, L-I-F-E, at checkout and save yourself 10% plus free shipping. That's dmlcbd.com/mug. Until next week, you stay well, and may God bless you and the United States of America.